Almost every day I see a church ask this question: should we build a church app? And it's a fair question. A lot of churches are building apps nowadays, but here's the kicker. There's a growing mountain of evidence that most churches don't actually know about, and that data suggests that building an app for your church is probably a bad idea. So much so that one of the fastest growing startups of all time, Intercom, published an article titled "Browsers, Not Apps, Are the Future of Mobile." Why? Well, keep watching to find out, because I'm going to share all of that new data with you in this video. Well, hey there, my name is Brady Shearer. I'm the CEO of Pro Church Tools, and hey, if you like this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. It's true, mobile apps can be incredibly powerful platforms, but before your church begins building an app, I think it's important to take a look at the actual data and statistics concerning mobile apps. Why? Well, because in my experience, churches that succeed with digital media and platforms like apps generally do two things very well. Number one, they make informed decisions based on data. They don't just blindly follow the trends. And number two, they don't try to do too much. Want to know whether or not your church should build an app? Well, let's begin this conversation by talking about the price of mobile apps and what you as a church should expect. Here are some terrifying numbers on the cost of developing custom mobile apps. Number one, a VDC survey of enterprise app developers found mobile apps to cost an average of $140,000 each. A Clutch survey of app development companies indicated a median price of more than $171,000 per app, and a Kinvey survey of CIOs found the average price to be $270,000 per app. So, simply stated, if you're in the market for building a custom app, at the very least, you should expect to spend at least $100,000. And as a side note, obviously these surveys are trustworthy, but every conversation I've had with a developer confirms these findings. Custom apps are crazy expensive, so if someone says that they can build you a custom app for significantly less, be cautious.
Okay, Brady, but no church is gonna pay $100,000 for an app.
Of course, it goes without saying that most churches can never afford a six-figure custom app, so how are these churches creating apps at all then? The answer? Templates. Here's the bottom line. If you see a church with an app, the app was almost certainly created using a pre-made template. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not saying templates are bad, not at all. Not everything needs to be original and built from scratch, but when the word custom app is thrown around, it's easy to assume that you're getting an app built from scratch, but that's just not the case. The bottom line? Custom apps cost six figures and beyond. Church apps are built using templates. But that's just part of the story, because in my experience, when a church decides they want a mobile app, there's one primary factor that's often driving this decision, whether they know it or not. Their website isn't doing its job. Consider this. The average mobile app from a church app company costs between $75 and $200 a month. And that is a considerable expense, especially considering that the majority of churches have less than 100 people present in their weekend worship services. Heck, 90% of American congregations have a weekly attendance of 350 or fewer. And look, I'm all for churches investing more money into their digital presence. In fact, I think it's necessary, but let me ask you this simple question. You've got social media, you've got your website. Knowing that 9 out of every 10 American churches is 350 people or fewer, do you really think that we should be spending another $75 to $200 each month on an app? Or, let me say it differently, what can a templated app do that your church's website cannot? You know, for the longest time, mobile apps could perform functions that most websites couldn't, but in recent years, web coding languages have progressed, and this is no longer the case. In fact, here's a comparison list between a church app and a modern church website builder. Both platforms cost about the same, and both are template-based. My church app is built mobile first, so is the website. My church app allows my congregation to take message notes during the sermon. So does the website. Okay, well, my church app allows my congregation to register for events and for ministries. So does the website. My church app integrates directly with our church management system. Well, so does the website. Okay, my church app has giving built directly into it. So does the website. My church app dynamically displays video, audio, blog content, and sermons. So does the website. My church app allows me to send push notifications. We'll sit tight on that one, more on that later. But here's the deal. What I'm trying to say is, when a church website does its job, it can do everything a mobile app can do and more, because a website can also be found in search engines. A website can also be used on desktops. A website can also be linked to directly from social media, and you never need to download it. Look, I get it. Church apps are glamorous. Let's not kid ourselves. There's a certain level of status that comes with having an app, searching the app store, and seeing your church's name come up. That can feel pretty cool. But we're living through the biggest communication shift in 500 years. And navigating this new digital world is difficult. We need to make smarter decisions. And every decision and investment your church makes should be able to directly answer the question, how does this allow us to better accomplish our mission? Because when it comes to mobile apps, the overlap between an app and your website is nearly 100%. And knowing this, why would your church pay for two different platforms that are doing the exact same thing? It just isn't prudent. Now, to this point, we've talked about the pricing of mobile apps. We've compared the differences between mobile apps and websites, but what about usage? Maybe you're thinking to yourself, okay, Brady, sure, a website may be able to perform the same functions of a mobile app, but apps are the future, right? Well, this is where, again, we need to take a look at the data that we have available to us to make an informed decision. Because remember, don't blindly follow trends. Don't look to the church down the road or your favorite megachurch. Make informed decisions. Now, here's the data that we have. As reported by ComScore, 50% of digital media consumption takes place within smartphone apps. Now, what does that mean? That means we spend a lot of time in our mobile apps. And on its own, this singular data point can be very convincing. But like all singular data points, an isolated statistic lacking context can be misleading. And in this case, it is, because here's the sobering truth. While apps are widely used across all demographics, 9 out of every 10 minutes of app usage on smartphones is spent on a user's top 5 apps only. Even more eye-opening, 50% of all app time on smartphones takes place in an individual's single most used app. What are these apps? Well, in order, here were the 10 most popular mobile apps last year: Facebook, YouTube, Facebook Messenger, Google Search, Google Maps, Instagram, Snapchat, Google Play, Gmail, and Pandora. So, yes, people spend a lot of time on their smartphone apps, but that time is largely dedicated to the app giants, not the average church app. It gets worse, because according to Google itself, 6 out of every 10 apps in their Google Play Store have been downloaded a grand total of 0 times. And this is what happens when a vast majority of the app pie is gobbled up by the big guys. There's only a tiny sliver of attention left for everyone else to fight over. The result? Tens of thousands of apps that never get a single download. And on a macro level, these numbers point toward an important trend. Mobile apps are beginning to decline. About 10 years ago, Apple announced the release of the iPhone in the App Store, and since that time, mobile apps have risen to being the single most important source of digital media in our lives, but that trend is beginning to curb. We're downloading fewer apps than ever before. We're using fewer apps than ever. You might say that all the gold has already been discovered and the app gold rush is over. And we don't stop there, because according to ComScore's most recent report, app discovery through the app stores, through word of mouth, and advertising all saw a decline compared to their numbers in the previous year. And this across-the-board decline led ComScore to ask the question in their report, is interest in new apps waning? And get this, one of ComScore's key takeaways from last year's app report said this: more signs of having reached peak app are emerging as interest in new apps begins to wane. It gets worse, because within the demographic of those ages 35 and older, only 1 in 4 download new apps more often than they delete or uninstall old ones. And if that's not bad enough, 51% of smartphone users download 0 new apps every month. Bottom line, most users download 0 new apps every month, and 75% of users over the age of 35 are actually deleting apps faster than they're downloading new ones. So we're actually going backwards. Again, signs that we've reached peak app. Now, let me stop for a moment and say this, because your church has an existing audience, right? Your congregation. It's probably unlikely that your church would build an app and have nobody download it. Despite the discouraging data that I just shared with you, there's a reasonable expectation that your church could be an outlier. But, and here's the kicker, just because a user downloads an app doesn't mean they'll actually become an active user. In fact, in the vast majority of cases, even though a person does download an app, they'll never become an active user. How do I know? Well, Fortune reported that 75% of people download an app, open it once, and then never come back. So what does this mean for you? Well, don't rely on app download statistics. I mean, who cares if someone downloads an app if they never actually use it? Because in most cases, data suggests that even though a person may download your app, it's highly unlikely they'll ever become an active user of it. Let's get to the real juicy stuff: push notifications. If there's one thing that mobile apps, even template-based ones, can do that your church website still cannot, it's send push notifications. I mean, sure, websites can send push notifications on desktop, but it's really not the same thing, right? And when it comes to template-based church apps, push notifications are the singular feature that I'm aware of that exists that a church website builder cannot replicate. When a church website does its job, it can do everything a mobile app can do and more, except send push notifications. So the question is this: is building a platform that costs your church $75 to $200 each month worth it just for push notifications? Think about that for a moment. More than $1,000 per year of your church's budget for just one unique feature, and one unique feature only. Remember, in my experience, churches that succeed with digital make informed decisions based on data. They don't just blindly follow the trends. So let's get some help in our decision making. What does the data tell us about push notifications in mobile apps? Spoiler alert, it's not great. Again, using ComScore's industry-leading yearly report, less than 1 in 5 people say that they always agree to an app's request to allow push notifications. And in the 35-plus age demographic, this number drops all the way to 1 in 20. So think about your church's demographic right now for a moment. What's the average age? For most churches, the biggest cohort is 35 and older, and in that age group, only 1 in 20, 5% only, say they always allow push notifications. So basically, nobody. Of course, you might be wondering, what about the young people, Brady? Surely the millennials love push notifications. Well, apparently not, because according to that same report, 71% of millennials say they get annoyed when they get too many notifications through apps. So almost 3 out of every 4 young people report that too many push notifications are annoying. So here's the bottom line: push notifications are rarely enabled, and the majority of people find them annoying when they receive too many. But that's just part of the story, because despite what you may have heard, you can actually send push notifications for free without your own app. So again, I think the data paints a pretty clear picture that very few people enable push notifications, and that feature alone is definitely not worth the monthly cost of an app, especially knowing that your church's website can do everything else an app can do and much more. But here's the kicker: you don't need to shell out $75 to $200 each month for a church app to begin leveraging push notifications in your church. In fact, you can do it for free. How? Well, every single one of the most popular communication apps in the world, email, Facebook, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, etc., allow you to send push notifications to your contacts and followers for free. And as an added bonus, most people already have one or more of these apps installed on their mobile devices already. They're active users now. And that's the problem with building your own app. You've got to convince people to actually download the app first. Then you need to convince them to turn on push notifications. Why not just leverage an app they're already using for free where their attention is already existing? Here's how to do it. Simply ask your followers and contacts to turn on push notifications for your specific account in the social communication app of your choice, and your church can begin sending push notifications instantly for free. To summarize, every major messaging and communication app that exists allows you to send push notifications to your followers and contacts for free. You don't need a mobile app to do it. Now, as if that's not enough, there's another important and frankly scary part of the church app discussion that we need to consider, because late in 2017, Apple struck fear into the hearts of many churches and template-based app builders when it made the following announcement. Going forward, according to guideline 4.2.6, apps created using a commercialized template or app generation service would be banned from the App Store. And not surprisingly, this generated a ton of panic. Press releases were published, church app companies scrambled to find solutions, the forums went crazy, people were freaking out, and rightfully so. Now, thankfully, Apple heard the cries of its users and amended the rule. The rule now reads, apps created from a commercialized template or app generation service will be rejected unless they're submitted directly by the provider of the app's content. Still not great, but better. And you might be wondering, what does that actually mean, and how could Apple have the power to simply reject certain apps? Well, simply put, their house, their rules. And I should note here that I had phone conversations with a number of the large church app company providers, and they shared with me their plans to work around the new Apple App Store rules before that revision was announced. And this should go without saying, church app providers love churches. They love their customers, and they want to serve them as best as they possibly can. But here's the sad truth. When your platform is at the mercy of a monopoly-holding colossus like Apple, there's only so much that you can do if Apple decides to one day just change the rules. And so it's important to recognize that with an app, you are operating on rented space. And Apple, the landlord, can change the lease terms anytime they want. With a website, that space is yours. It belongs to you. And there's no monopoly keeping you from hosting your website elsewhere if your existing hosting company changes the rules. Just another reason why a website is so much more important than an app. Finally, there's one more thing you need to know about mobile apps versus websites, because when comparing the top 500 mobile web properties to the top 500 mobile apps, ComScore found that the website audiences were 2.2 times larger than the app audiences. What does this mean? It simply means that, again, having a website is still much more important than an app. The audience share is bigger, and this doesn't even take into account desktop audiences. That's mobile only. Don't forget that websites still have all desktop audiences that apps cannot reach, and 34% of all digital media time is still spent on desktop computers. To conclude, there are plenty of thoughts and data points to be mined from this video, but making an investment in a church app is a big decision. And I want to make sure that you have as much information as possible to help your church make the best decision you can. I've been working alongside churches for more than 7 years now, helping them navigate the biggest communication shift we've seen in 500 years. My observation, the vast majority of churches will not benefit from a church app. There are more affordable, more efficient, and more accessible platforms available. I know church apps can seem glamorous, and I know how tough it is to figure out digital and make purchase decisions. And I know, maybe you're thinking, Brady, what's the big deal? It's just an app. Who cares? Just go for it. And while I can appreciate that mindset, remember that 90% of churches are 350 people or fewer in weekly attendance. The average church app costs between $75 and $200 per month. So the reality is that our churches are working with limited resources. Meaning, for the vast majority of churches, money being spent on an app is money being taken away from social media and the website. And I cannot tell you how many churches I've encountered that have prioritized their app, and because of it, their social and web presences have suffered. Because here's the deal. Most churches can't do both. You need to choose. You need to prioritize because the resources are not unlimited. So my advice is this: continue to invest in your social presence, continue to invest in your website, because these platforms will do a considerably better job than a template-based mobile app at accomplishing your church's mission using these new digital tools we have available to us. Did you learn something cool in this video? If so, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button below. Also, make sure to click the link in the YouTube description to visit the full post for this video, where you'll find additional research and all the citations for this video. And hey, don't just take it from me. Also linked in that post, you'll find additional reading on why mobile websites are better than mobile apps from startup giants like Intercom. And now I'm going to turn things over to you. What was the most surprising thing you learned in this video? Was it the data on how few people enable push notifications? Or maybe the cost of what a real custom app actually is? Or maybe just the revelation that your church's website can do anything a church app can do, and more. Let me know by leaving your answer in the comments on this YouTube video.